Hi, my friends.
Hi.
Hey guys,
Hey,
Hi.
hey,
How are you
y'all.
guys doing?
doing
It's
great.
fine.
Oh, the light is on now.
Yes, that was very some video effect that we have agreed on before here.
My
So
wife is
we're here.
helping me.
That's
Very
she's a
nice.
doll. So guys, we're here to our 14th day of this amazing study. We're studying the book Paul and Stephen, an amazing book that was psychographed by our beloved Chico Xavier. We have finished last week the first part of the book. This book is a novel, it has two parts, and today we're starting the second part of the book. Now we're gonna see a very different man from Saul to Paul of Tarsus, and we're seeing now a Christian, one of the greatest Christians that this planet has ever seen, a man that changed the world and really brought us humans here a very honest, just, a very sincere perspective of the Christ. So we have loads of interesting things to talk about tonight. But before we do that, our great friend Norah here will bring us some prayer, and then we can get more relaxed, get calmer, and go ahead studying this book that is so beautiful and special.
All right. Dear Mother, Father, God, we thank you so much from the bottom of our hearts for being here, whether live or on demand. We ask for blessings, abundance starting from our hearts and out. That if anyone listening to this is listening and needing a message of hope, that the special messengers of the good touch each and every heart and bless us all. Say the Hail Mary prayer. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners now and at the hour of our death. With that, we kindly ask permission to begin this beautiful study. And so be it.
Beautiful, dear. So much. Thank you so much. Guys, so last week we finished the first part of the book. And in that first part, we saw Saul of Tarsus, this very impressive man who was very proud, who had that lovely fiancee named Abigail. We saw her brother called Stephen. We saw all that context, and we saw that Saul of Tarsus was the huge and the major persecutor of Christ's doctrine. And now, when we enter the second part of the book, we need to remember that we finished last week seeing that very harsh man being absolutely thrown and down for Christ. He was down his knees, absolutely down on his knees, and on his knees, and he said those powerful words, "Jesus, Lord, what would you have me do?" And now we enter the second part of the book where he's blind. He's already believing that that Jesus Christ is the Messiah. And now we're going to see how he handles everything that comes from that mental attitude, and how those people and friends that were surrounding him there when he was the almighty Saul of Tarsus will receive him in this new perspective with his new ideas. So we saw that in the desert he was with his soldier named Sadok, and he told him, the soldier asked him, "Sir, where are we going?" I'm sorry, the soldier name is Jacob. And he was really afraid because he knew that something was very wrong, because that soldier could notice that Saul of Tarsus was actually becoming a Christian. And Saul thought for a moment and said, "I do have some money with me. However, I am in a very difficult situation. I feel I need moral support more than physical rest. I need somebody to help me get a grasp on what happened. Do you know where Sadok lives?" This was a confusion of mine. Sadok is Saul of Tarsus' friend, and they have been friends like forever. They are good friends, and they were both Jews. Take me there after I visited my friend. I will think about lodging. It was not long before they were at the door of a splendid looking building. Answering the servant's call, all the door to the house, Sadak tried to determine the reason for such an unexpected visit. Jacob humbly explained that he had come from Jerusalem accompanying the doctor of the law, describing the smallest details of the journey and its purpose. However, when he mentioned the main event, Sadak opened his eyes wide in astonishment. He could hardly believe what he was hearing. Jacob then spoke of the miserable state of his master, his blindness, and his copious tears. Saul weeping, that man that we saw in the first part of the book, weeping. Sadak received the strange news with immense surprise, summing up his first impressions in a bewildered reply to Jacob. What you are telling me is incredible. What is more, under such circumstances, I'm afraid I cannot let you stay here. Since the day before yesterday, I have had a house full of important friends who recently arrived from Sidon. I for meeting in the synagogue next Sabbath. It seems to me that Saul has become unexpectedly deranged, and I do not want to expose him to undefined criticism and remarks. This is really interesting because, as we've seen before, they were all about keeping the pride and keeping the appearance. But, sir, what shall I tell him? Asked Jacob reluctantly. Tell him I'm not home, but I'm alone with him. He's disturbed and ill, and as you can see, the night is stormy. Sadak thought for a moment and added, that won't be hard to remedy. At the next corner, you will come to Straight Street, and after a short walk, you'll see Judas Inn. They always have plenty of rooms available. Later on, I'll get there to find out what happened. Saul accompanied his servant, listening to everything in silence after wiping away a tear. He had not planned on such a reception from a colleague he had always considered worthy and loyal in every circumstance of life. So we see that the doors are becoming to be closed for him, the Almighty Saul of Tarsus. However, in the swirl of sorrows that were beginning to swell in his heart, he suddenly remembered the vision of Jesus and reflected on the fact that he had experienced something that Sadak could not possibly have understood. He arrived at the conclusion that perhaps he would have done the same if their roles were switched. A very interesting Christian perspective here. Now he's not always searching revenge. He's already being much more resigned and putting himself on the place of others. Saul perceived a vague feeling of unwanted fright in Jacob's words. Sadok's behavior had perhaps added to Jacob's misgivings. His comments were reticent and hesitant. He seemed scared, as if foreseeing threats to his personal peace of mind. In the simplest expressions, he revealed the fear of being accused of having any link with the way. In his broad psychological awareness, Saul understood it all. It was true that he had stood as the supreme leader of the terrible persecution, but from now on, consecrating his life to Jesus, he would compromise, anyone who approached him directly or ostensibly. His transformation would provoke many an outcry within Pharisaic circles. He sensed in Jacob's indecision the fear of being accused of some sort of sorcery or witchcraft. After they had comfortably settled in at Judas Maras inn, Jacob said worriedly, Sir, I'm sorry to bring up my own needs, but according to prior arrangements, I need to return to Jerusalem, where my two children are waiting for me, so that we may settle in Caesarea. That'll be fine, answered Saul, respecting Jacob's scruples. You may leave tomorrow morning. Besides, he continued, as if to comfort himself, Jesus told me to enter the city in order to find out what to do. I'm sure he will not keep me in ignorance about it. This is really interesting because he had barely become a Christian and he's already full of faith in Jesus Christ. This is beautiful. Saul was not alone. In the thick veil of darkness, he gave himself over to deep and sad thoughts. His full and generous money bag assured him the attention of the innkeeper, who from time to time came to see about his needs, but he could not convince his guest to take part in the meals and entertainment because nothing would draw him away from his reserved isolation. Those 3 days in Damascus were comprised of strict spiritual discipline. His dynamic personality had put a stop to mundane activities so that he could examine the errors of his past, the difficulties of his present, and the undertakings of his future. In appraising human values, Saul experienced the unbearable anguish of those who are completely forsaken. But in the whirlwind of his memories, the figures of Stephen and Abigail stood out, offering him consoling sentiments. He now understood that Christ, who had come into the world principally for I'm sorry, I want to read this again. He now understood that Christ, who had come into the world principally for the unfortunate and sad of heart. This is really, really beautiful because, as we've seen before, Saul usually got really angry when people was in this resigned vibe. Although they were immersed in sorrowful situations, they would think that no, there's hope in the future, and now he was experiencing that himself. Previously, he had rebelled against the Nazarene Messiah, in whose act he had seen some sort of incomprehensible pleasure in suffering. However, he had come to study himself better now, drawing from his own experience the most useful reflections. Deeply immersed in the blindness that enveloped him, he prayed fervently for God not to leave him helpless and asked Jesus to clear his mind, tormented by thoughts of despair and abandonment. This is so beautiful. Now I pass the word to Daniel.
Thanks, João. So, on the third day of prayer, a short old man with white hair and a kind smile asked for Saul. And when Saul anxiously asked his name, the old man revealed himself, the one sent to that place so he could recover his sight and receive the illumination of the Holy Spirit, and that is called Ananias. Saul thought the, of Saul thought of Ananias as the disciple who taught Abigail the doctrine of Jesus and as the very reason of his trip to Damascus. Now he was there to serve, calling his own persecutor a brother. All Saul could say was, I would like to kiss your tunic, but as you can see, I'm blind. Ananias noticed that Saul of Tarsus was really transformed. Then, with eyes in tears, Saul exclaimed, Jesus is the eternal Messiah. I have put my soul in his hands. I repent for the way I have lived. Ananias felt he should stop those ultimate renunciation gestures, but something kind of influenced him to put his hand over Saul's brow and declare this this sentence. It's such a strong moment. Brother Saul, in the name of Almighty God, I consecrate you to the new faith in Christ Jesus. And Saul exclaimed, May the Lord forgive my sins and enlighten my purpose, purposes for a new life. Ananias completed by saying, how, in the name of the Savior, I pray to God that you may see again. As something like scales were falling down from Saul's eyelids, he recovered his sight, and both Saul and Ananias got really filled with joy, and they started to cry a lot. And Ananias lifted Saul by the arms and asked for an embrace to praise the Master who made them brothers. And also, they overcame so much differences and so much. They were enemies at that point, and they talked about belonging to Jesus. And I find this really interesting because what does mean belonging to to Christ? Okay, so Christ really doesn't even want to own us. What he what we do actually when we say that we belong to Jesus and that we are slaves to of his doctrine of his love is that we wish no other thing than to serve other people just like he taught us. So that's a kind of happiness that uh, puts you in a circumstance of servitude of slavery. So that's completely voluntary. And Saul was hungry for knowledge about Jesus and started a conversation right away. From uh, Ananias told him that he was a shoemaker in, I believe this is, I should read this, Emmaus, don't know. This is the name of the city. 8 miles from Jerusalem, and that he went to Jerusalem in order to participate in the temple celebrations. But once there, he saw Jesus being humiliated and led to the crucifixion at the Calvary. He spoke of the powerful look Jesus gave him, strong and spiritually deep enough to make him leave his possessions behind in Emmaus and go to learn how to live according to the lessons of the gospel with Simon Peter. Once again, this is a character of the book that who immediately as soon as he got to know the gospel, he transformed himself. This is another one. So Ananias is that kind of spirit too. And Simon Peter arranged to send him to Joppa to help other disciples there until the persecutions intensified after Stephen's death, and then he got away to Damascus. See how the stories crisscross at that point. Ananias was sent to Joppa by Simon Peter to help Philip and James there, and that's when he got to know Abigail, and all of this part of the story started. Saul confirmed his duty of taking him prisoner with the intention of and uh, torture, torturing him to death. So this is Saul had to confess that with a trembling heart, but it was a moment of truth, and he had to spoke that out. But it was Ananias who came to save him and make a voluntary and happy slave out of him. And so Ananias smiled, completely happy. And at this point, I give the word to Nora.
Wow, guys, this is beautiful. I mean, just to take a breather, I love the part where John talks about the hope, right? And that spirit of just being resigned that Saul didn't understand, but now he's at that level. And another part that Daniel said before I forget, I love the part where you said where Saul was out to get Ananias, but it turns out it was the other way around. It's always so important to remember that life can take so many turns. We never know. We think, oh, I'm set, and life in seconds it can change. It's so important to respect and to be on that path. So I think there's a lot of stuff that we can really learn through these amazing, amazing stories and beings, right? So I'm gonna share the a slide here because you know some of us are very visual. So this is taken from a Bible's website that is telling, I think it's pronounced Jaffa or something like this. I said Joppa, but I'm not too sure. So I'm like, where exactly is that? Now we're going to zoom out a little bit, and we're talking about this route from Jerusalem to Joppa right here, just for us to have a visual of what's happening. And I know we're going to come back to a couple of maps later as we talk, but starting off with this, in this part, I'm going to go back. If I was to summarize it, it would be like in two sentences, because basically what happens in this part is Saul and Ananias are talking. Okay, so they're talking back and forth. After they talk, Saul was going to go to the synagogue to talk to his friend Sadok. All right, and then that's what we're dealing with. So instead of, so those are the two things we're going to talk about. So now we're going to break down. So one of the things, among several things, now we get a little bit more, I say, spiritually intimate, because we're getting some of those more in depth details. Because as João said, it was like Saul was here, but it was like he's a GT student, like he just was racing. And so we see the conversation. One of the things was immortality that Ananias brings up, but we must believe that she, right, Abby, lives in the immortal realm, and who knows, perhaps her prayers at Jesus' feet contributed to the Master having called you to the light of the gospel at the gates of Damascus. So, as Ananias and Saul are talking, and as Daniel said, as he's sharing his stories between Jerusalem and Joppa and Damascus, etc., Abby came, or Abigail comes in the picture. And Saul agrees. He says, you know what? Abigail could not be dead, because he had this vision with Jesus. So he understood. He's understanding life is not just this kind of 3D version that we have. There's more in detail. So that's something for us to imagine. And we're starting to, it's been a while. It's something that's difficult to prove, I think, in a certain way. But through our experiences, I don't know if maybe Daniel might want to say something, but through our experiences, or even like through, you know, through something, through a message, that we see that there's more than this, right? So I know, for instance, I lost my dog a couple weeks ago. And just today, I remember, like, oh my gosh, I felt the energy. And I mean, everybody's open to thinking, but that experience, whether it was the memory or I don't know what it was, but I felt something so powerful inside. And I can imagine, and maybe we all have an experience like that, where there is Saul and Ananias having that conversation, bringing Abby and getting that affirmation. I think that's a beautiful, best way that I've learned to understand a little bit about life after death. But of course, there's a lot of stuff and a lot of research that is coming out. So that's beautiful. I don't know if Daniel would like to say anything.
I will say something precisely about that. I'm so happy you brought that up. But after you
Are you sure?
finish,
Okay.
Yeah.
So they continue talking. Another point now is like Saul is ready to read the Gospels. And this is powerful because, um, studying a little bit the acquisition of language, it took billions of years actually for language to develop in humans. They've been doing some research in the Neanderthals, and they think that that was the first indicative. There's a little part here that the Neanderthals have. They started to utilize language. Think about this. Written language comes much, much later. And the powerful thing of having the knowledge today, there's Saul, right? In his time, wanting to read the Gospels. And that is so beautiful because we are continuously being invited once we cross the little line to take advantage of everything that we have around us and understanding that reading will open up different interpretations and different things, give us that knowledge that we need. And another beautiful thing, that, where can I get this book, right? So Saul's like at that time, we have to think also of the history. They had to hide the scripture. They had to hide, so we can put ourselves in that perspective. Like, where's the book? And the old Saul would have wanted to burn those books, but the rejuvenated, refreshed Saul is wanting to have access to that. Another thing that they talked about is spreading the news. So Sal was ready, as Ram uh, shared with us. He was so ready to be on board. Like, I'm going to share, I'm going to share. He says here, we must find a way to spread the new revelation as widely as possible. Jesus is our help from heaven. To delay his message is to prolong humankind's despair. Besides, the word gospel means good news. It is crucial for us to spread the news that comes from the highest planes of life. And so, as Sao is saying this message, um, Ananias say, okay, very good. You're right. You are absolutely right. But please, let me see. It says here, but I think you should be very prudent during this new religious phase. All right. So we're going to stop for a little bit to reflect on that because we are studying this book and there seems to be a lot of that religious relationship in here, right? And we think about it, we can always cross reference with the Bible, and of course, we have the Gospels according to Spiritism. But yet, when Ananias says that, it says this, it's almost like it makes us stop and think, right? Once again, to understand that when it's not about the religion, but to then, if it's not this, how can I spread that, those news, right? And it's always in our days today, to be respectful of different people and their beliefs and where they're at. We're all at different points of understanding, and I think Ananias was telling him it's not to not go and spread the news, Sal, right? But it's to be prudent. And so I think one of the most beautiful gifts that we have of Spiritism is really because it's the charity, right? Or the fraternity. When we put ourselves out there to help, to be role models, without even saying a word, we could already be spreading these good news, which I think is kind of where this is alluding to, for in a more modern version that we can relate to, right? Because there's so much outside material, and there's already material, even though it's not labeled Spiritism, it is still very good content that helps us get to places that might help us make a connection where we didn't. So Ananias advice for Saul, being so new, so fresh in this, right, quote unquote, and wanting to spread, was good. And I remember when I came across Spiritism, I wanted everybody read the books. You don't understand, and people are like, what? into years later, it took time to understand, be that example, and everything else will fall into place and people will ask, right? Especially here in the United States, once they know a little bit, they will start to ask. So that was a beautiful conversation. Another thing that they talked about was the healing, right? That Daniel mentioned. And it's Saul says, Jesus sent me a doctor. Ananias came to help me, to heal me in his name. And it's so important that healing, it's not the person, but it's Jesus, it's God, it's those divine beings, and we're merely the messengers, we're the vehicles that are being used. So that's very beautiful. But also because Saul could have taken a different direction. He could have said, let's make an inference. If Jesus doesn't come again the way I saw him in the vision, I'm not going to be open to this healing experience. But yet Saul didn't do that. He had the humility and the faith, right? The hope, that this was a messenger, and he got healed. And so many times in our daily lives, we have signs all over, right? To come and tell us, you know, um, give us answers to questions that we have had, get us to places. Sometimes it might take one or two things. Sometimes we need to solve a little puzzle, but we're always getting clues. We're always getting answers. We just have to be open to that. And I think that comment was super powerful coming from Sal. Um, Another thing that I find this beautiful, that they were talking about, what do I do with the knowledge from my past? Do I, is it does it go to waste? And here, absolutely not. We've talked about this multiple times. Here, Saul says, I used to occupy my time with the study and exegesis, I don't know how to say that word, of the law of Moses. Now, however, I shall fill my hours with the Spirit of Christ. I shall work at that task until the end of my days, and I shall try to begin my work right here in Damascus. It's so important that everything that we bring with us, we understand are like, it's like a ladder that we're building to get to bigger, higher places, none, or wherever we need to get to, whether it's in knowledge and life, to get ahead. And that respect for his past is so important. He didn't sat there and be like guilty or, oh my gosh, I'm so terrible. Like, oh my, he didn't dwell on that. He took that spirit, that behavior that he had, and now he's going to use it for this. So it's so beautiful how we start to understand, and I remember, you know, coming into Spiritism, there was a lot of stuff here in the United States that, had the blessing of reading beforehand and all of it, starting to put the pieces together, even growing up in a church, having that in our references was so beautiful, and it just keeps building and building, and that's really nice. um all right, so then what ends up happening? Ananias and Saul felt happy. And it says here they had lunch together like old and loyal friends. Even though it's not here, we can make an inference the same thing, talking about reincarnation, past lives, right? Whenever we have friendships, that's like, wow, I feel like I've known you from such a long time. That's kind of what they were having, that moment, that experience. So there's a little bit more of the spiritism components in the second part starting. So it is very true when João says second part is different. So it's beautiful. And so after they were having this conversation, and it's very different, right? It is so different from the style that we got in part one. All the little things that we could probably break down even more so are already explaining to us that that experience that he had, that vision of Jesus was enough, right? Because it was his heart in it. He truly believed. And with this, he says, okay, Ananias, I'm going to go to the synagogue and I'm going to look for my friend Sadok, right? So they go, and he says, right? And Sedok's like, oh my gosh, look at you. I knew you were in town, but I didn't want to embarrass you. You know, you're sounding a little crazy because you're into all of that. And then Saul, he says here, but Zadok replied Saul calmly, I saw Jesus resurrected, right? And it says here, the others made a great effort to contain an outburst of laughter. And, just to finish this thought with this, like, first we can always use the usual when something we don't understand, right? Maybe that fear, we might want to laugh. But it says here that saw Jesus. He felt Jesus. He had that Jesus experience. For him, it was so real, and people couldn't understand it. And that's why when people don't know, right, like the ignorance of the experience, or not even being open to it, right? People have weird reactions, and we've all been guilty, of it. And so them wanting to laugh, it's something like understandable, but let's take a pause, because I always feel like reading for us to understand ourselves is very critical, right? To not fall and be like these people around, to not be like Sadok or the people around Saul. If somebody has an experience, and even if it might be different than ours, okay, just listen and just take it in, and just remember, that's another person's experience, and to respect it, because for them it was very real. And so much so that now we have a different Saul. So this was definitely a very, very, very different part. Let me remove my sides, and there it is. Thanks, friends.
Beautiful, dear. So, so beautiful. And as we've talked before here, yes, we're entering a very different part of the book. And in this second part, we have loads of things to analyze as spiritists that we are, and as a spirits reading this book. Bro, do you want to say something before I bring some comments? No? Okay. Guys, there are a couple of things that I would like to comment here, and to bring as we have done the Spirit's book. As we saw when I was bringing the book's texts, we see this man very in a very different situation. He was feeling afraid. He was feeling much weaker. He had this huge transformation because he was a very powerful man, and now he was in a very humble place, totally different. But we saw in the book that he started to receive a couple of thoughts before he started thinking about Jesus, and after that, when he was full of hope and faith and more resigned, he started thinking about Abigail, Abby, as Nora, and as Nora says her name, and Stephen. And this is a thing that the Spirit's book explains to us. I'm going to read two questions here about this contact. Question 459: do spirits have any influence on our thoughts and actions? The superior spirits responded, their influence on you in this regard is greater than you suppose, for very frequently it is they who guide you. As we've seen and talked here before, since he could connect, he could get more elevated in terms of vibration, he could achieve this point where he would receive Abby and Stephen's thinkings. Question 460. Do we have our own thoughts plus others that are suggested to us? And here, this question is really important because we saw that he was receiving thoughts from Abigail and Stephen. The answer: your soul is a spirit who thinks by itself. Nevertheless, you must have noticed that many thoughts occur to you all at the same time with regards to the same subject, and that they frequently contradict one another. Well, they are always a combination of your own ideas and other spirits' ideas. And this is what renders you uncertain. You have several ideas within your mind battling it out with each other. we see here that Kardec was, when he was putting together the codification, he was explaining this exact moment that we saw in the book. And this is why Saul, and now, yes, yet Saul of Tarsus was receiving those thoughts. Another thing, another very interesting thing here. We saw in this part of the book a very interesting mediumistic phenomenon, the healing process when he recovered his sight. He was blind and then he was healed. This is really interesting because we know that God, there's no random situation, there's no random assembly of things. So we do feel and think that God would reserve a very special man, a very special medium, to be there talking to Saul of Tarsus and to heal him. So we see here that Ananias was a medium, and we're gonna see that, and we've seen in the book that he has multiple gifts. He's not only a healer; he has another mediumistic powers as well. But here, since we saw that Saul of Tarsus was healed, I want to bring another question from the Spirit's book. I want to read question 556. Let me find it here. Mm. This question is really interesting because we see that he's a medium. Kardec asked the superior spirits, and they answered. Do certain individuals really possess the gift of healing by simply touch? That's the question. The answer. Their magnetic power may act to that extent when it is aided by purity of sentiments and an ardent desire to do good. For then, good spirits come to their aid. It is necessary, however, to distress the way stories are told by very gullible or enthusiastic individuals who are always ready to see the miraculous in the simplest and most natural things. One must always distrust the self interested claims of persons who exploit credulity for their own profit. Amazing answer. As we're for sure here that Ananias was a medium and he was able to heal Saul of Tarsus, and he healed him. But the important thing here, and Norah touched the subject, that Saul was presenting a mental attitude that was in favor of that healing process, because as we've seen, he went through loads of bad things. He was blind. He could obviously be immersed in bad thoughts. He was having bad thoughts, but he was able to recover his faith and his hope. And in doing that, he was helping the healing process. And then Jesus sent a medium, Ananias, to heal him with all those magnetic powers and all the things that a medium has to do in order to proceed that way. So this is very interesting because in this part of the book, we're going to see loads of mediumistic phenomena, and this is one of the first, a very important one, because and Norah has studied Andrea Louise books with us. We see that when the person does not contribute with a good mental attitude, they don't get healed. They're not, it's impossible to help them. And that's why when we see in the Bible all those amazing, we could, although we know they're not miracles, we're just using the word. When we see those amazing miracles that Jesus performed a couple of times, we see in the, actually in the major times, in the major moments, we see in the Bible Jesus saying, your faith healed you. You were saved by your own faith. That's why, because the one being helped with his or her mental attitude. This is really important. And Tarsus was a new man. Do you guys wanna say something?
Yeah, go Nora. So,
You go first today.
Stereo maps got me excited. Love that. Love maps. So nice. So, I wanted to talk about this book. Um, it's in Portuguese. the Book of the Mediums. It's the second book um, Kardec wrote. So at the topic 21, he wrote about the materialistic ones for the lack of something better. So it means people who are materialistic because they don't have anything better to believe. What does that mean? They have these people, and this is specifically about the situation we are studying about Saul, and which I can relate so much. That's why I like it's the way I have encountered this doctrine. You know, we feel this uncertainty, and this is a torment to people like this because they sense a vague aspiration for something bigger than life, than matter, and what they got taught can't convince them for not being reasonable enough. So they live in a materialistic way, but longing to fill this oddly gap. So this was specifically what I felt before knowing the spirit doctrine, and you know that kind of save us. That it's it's consolating. Yes, this doctrine has a huge power of consolating our hearts, but also our questions can be solved. I had so many questions at that time, and you can see in Saul that he aspired to something bigger, but all he had was the laws of the Jewish people, those harsh penalties he had to put on people. So that's what he got. So he would put all his energy to fulfill those duties. And their faith, people like this have a faith like a dormant germ smothered by weeds or a castaway who gets a lifeline. These are words of Kardec. So it's amazing. That's why I love so much the role Saul gets plays in this story. It's the great transformation, and it is not because he wants to prove anything. That's because he had like a seed uh, uh, sleeping inside of him, just waiting, for that breach to crack open and start to grow. And this is wonderful. And I think most of the people who are searching more knowledge about the spirit doctrine feels the same. It's about filling this gap and trying to escape the materialism that we are all stuck in. Nora, Nora, you can go. Thanks.
Well, guys, you are all are nailing it. I'm like, I just have to say, just to add a little bit of non-spiritist, so we can cross-reference. We've done the Bible, we've done spiritism, but we have Louis Hay here in the U.S. who talked a little bit about healing, and also Dr. Joe Dispenza. And when I'm thinking about these things, I feel like Soul Story was like the GT, like the fast speed version of it, because it was interesting how it was his eyes that got that um they got blind and then he was able to see. And in Lois Hay, she has this book, You Can Hear Your Life, I think is what it's called. She has a chart towards the end. she says, that she started seeing so many people, and after a while, she started to listen and make patterns. Certain things that people had would relate to different ailments. And so she composed, right? This is not like, this is more of a holistic list of symptoms that are more emotional symptoms that match to an illness. And through affirmations, through changing the whole paradigm of a mind, and she talks about prayer and God and all of that, people are able to do it, right? And we also have Dr. Joe Dispenza, who talks a lot about changing our thoughts, changing the mind to where you can do that in a DNA level so that the bigger healings can happen. He had an accident. He was, I think, paraplegic, and he would every day he would see himself, right, standing, and it happened, and now he has amazing books. But even with this, right, these are all situations that take time, and to put what we have today in Saul's time, it is beyond. Like João said, it's we're using the word miracle because of the biblical sense, but we know in spiritism, like it was fast. And I know Daniel last class has said, well, what is the workings of it, right? How Jesus was able to do that so fast. I'm very fascinated by magnetism and the thoughts and just the overall blessing of healings. It's just absolutely beautiful. But it goes to show, though, that he elements are also related to things of us that are emotional, maybe from past lives. I'm not that this is directly from Saul, but we can just extract that experience and kind of bring it out here into our lives to maybe understand if maybe one of us is going through a situation. I mean, we've all had some form of ailment, and we see that this is to help us to process. It was not like a punishment, because when we think of Saul's situation, it didn't seem like it, right? It really wasn't, because he came out victorious because he wanted to. So it was very powerful, the whole symbolically, and even the whole science aspect of his healing. So it was beautiful. Thanks, guys.
Beautiful, dear. So much. I love Joe Dispenza's book, You're the Placebo. I love that book. I love that book. I have read it more than once, and it's really about a mental attitude. And we remember that Jesus told us that we are gods, so we have all the power within ourselves. And Joe Dispenza, I think he's a really special man because he brings us how our minds have the power to heal our bodies. His work, I really admire him. I love that you brought him in this context, because I do think that Christianity is a way of reaching a higher spirituality, but there are others. We are not holding the only truth here. There are multiple ways, and understanding the mind. It's amazing. It's amazing. In his book, we do find, and we end the book believing that we have this huge pharmaceutical industry within ourselves, and that we're capable of amazing miracles. He has loads of examples with people who follow him. He has those amazing workshops. I do admire that man and what he has brought us. He is an amazing example of healing. He healed himself, and it was quite impressive.
So
I
maybe,
have. Oh, so
okay,
sorry, dear.
so
Go
maybe
ahead.
I guess we can say we can all, in a sense, have that healing
Yes.
mediumship, like maybe it's
Yes.
more, I feel like it could be from connecting dots together. And then we know Andre books too, they have
Yes.
a
Exactly.
lot of plethora of information
Yes.
on healing and how the spirits, they work with the centers and the energy, and everything has to be put together. So yeah, it's beautiful.
Yes. In the Spirits book, we see, I'm going to bring the question here really quickly. Question 23, the Spirits book. Um, Question 23. What is a spirit? Answer: the intelligent principle of the universe. That's the answer. Andrea Luis brings us in all his books. He talks about that more than once. That from the smallest atom to the most complex union of atoms, the spirit is the one power commanding all that. So of course, if we reach the mental attitude, because that's what is our spirit. The spirit, as the spirit's book brings us, is the I'm gonna read it again, is the intelligent principle of the universe. So it is in us. We have that power. We have the power to do miracles. We just need to reach that state, and someday we'll do that. As Jesus told us that we would be able with faith to move mountains. This is about using our minds to move mountains. One day, that will be nothing to us. We will reach that place. So seeing how Saul of Tarsus' mental attitude helped him to be um, a part of that amazing and beautiful healing process is something that we really need to pay attention in, because it's very symbolic and it brings us loads of teachings. Do you guys want to say something before we finish here?
We have to talk about miracles. We have a short time, that's true, but uh, I'll try to bring something, about God, spirits, and matter, and how spirits act over matter. It's so important and explains a lot of about what's happening with the with the characters in the book, about healings and all of that.
Dear, do you want to say something else?
I want to say thank you, and it is very powerful to see how, we can connect more than we think. So even though these books are stories that happened, a long time ago, if we align ourselves and are open to that, we can always relate to something from Saul. I have a little bit of Saul, I have a little bit of Ananias, and have a little bit of that spirit of that time, and put it in context of today, and try to use that every day to just be better, better, more kind, and just more loving towards ourselves, towards everyone, and just be better, because that's what we read for. As a reading teacher, I always, I advise my kids, guys, read to always just amplify, excuse me, your knowledge, your passion for reading, but also just for everything, to be a better, more well-rounded person. So it is absolutely amazing. Just a little couple of pages that we read, everything we can learn and take from. I learned so much this evening. Thanks, guys. Yeah.
Me too. I just want to thank you guys. And as Daniel brought us, we're going to talk a lot about miracles in the next chapters, in the next pages, because and see how those so-called miracles are nothing but something very natural, a couple of phenomenon that can be explained with all those amazing laws that God brought us, and that the Spiritist doctrine analyzed and made it much more easy, much easier. Bro, do you want to say something else today?
Thanks, guys, one more time. So nice to be with you guys.
Thank
It's
you.
great. We are learning so much together.
Yes, me too. I'm learning a lot with you too. I just want to thank you both. Thank everybody that is watching the studies, that are sending messages. We read them all. Everybody, thank you guys so much. Studying with you is very, very nice, and this exchange of thoughts, it's a really rich experience. Thank you guys so much. See you guys next week. Okay,
Bye, guys.
Bye, guys.
See you next time.
bye bye.